Good day, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. This is Jobren, yours truly. Thank you for watching all my videos. Thank you for sharing, for sending your likes, your feedback, your comments to all my videos posted. So for today's vlog is I'll be explaining to you our lesson number 3 in the subject of human popular culture. So we will try to dig deeper what is really the meaning of culture. Okay, so the title for today's video is I'll be explaining to you culture and the culture learning process. So since this is a very long discussion, so I've decided to cut it into two. So we will focus first on the idea of culture. So since we are done explaining about understanding popular culture, what is society, what is culture, so let's try to go deeper regarding the idea of culture. So, culture is studied by many different disciplines. So, including anthropology, sociology, education, psychology, business, and the military. So, with all of these definitions, we have a lot of definitions when you talk about culture, and that they only have one thing in common. So, when you talk about culture, is that culture refers to a human-made part of the environment as opposed to aspects that occur in nature. Meaning when you talk about culture, culture is this is a human-made part of the environment. Meaning we are the ones creating our own culture. So that is their common ground. That is their main idea. What is culture? And culture determines to a large extent. So when you talk about culture, there are various definition of culture. It entails our thoughts, our ideas, our ways of interacting, and how we adapt to our environment. That is culture. So let's try to think about what are the three views of culture. So the first one is we've got anthropology. So what is anthropology? Diba, culture is studied in anthropology. So what is anthropology? Anthropology, they are studying the whole function of our society. How people interact, how we develop as a person. So their focus is the whole society, not just one part of the society. So according to Webb and Sherman, they describe culture in a functional way. So they describe culture on how we function as a person. The first one is culture solve the common problems of human beings, but they solve them in different ways. Meaning, when you talk about culture, we have the same problem, we have the same common problems, but how we solve our own problem, it really depends on us. We are solving our own problem in different ways, although we have the same problem. So that is the definition of Webb and Sherman. But what makes culture similar is the problems they solve. So what makes us similar when you talk about culture is we have the same problem. But what makes us different is how we solve our own problem. So that's the idea of anthropologist. Okay, so we can clearly understand the idea of culture by using this concept. So I have here some of their concepts. I will be explaining it to you one by one. So for us to better understand the idea of culture is first, we need to know what is the meaning of human construct culture. What is human? Human, this is us, right? Construct, meaning the way we construct ourselves or the way we think about ourselves, that is possibly the influence of your own culture. So humans, we must discover ways, we must think of ways on how we interact with other people and the people around us. We need to find ways on how we interact with our environment and within ourselves. So that's why we need to acquire a lot of knowledge, a lot of skills, a lot of competencies for us to have a better interaction with other people and especially within ourselves. So the more we gain knowledge, the more we are able to survive life. The more we acquire a lot of skills, a lot of competencies, the more we can do better with our lives. That is the idea of human construct. For example, I have this knowledge, meaning if I have this kind of knowledge, it is easy for me to share my knowledge to others because I have already this kind, the human construct culture. I have my own belief, I have my own thoughts, I have my own ideas. So we all have our own ideas. So we just have to learn how to share it for us to have a better relationship with others, for us to have a better environment for the people around us, and especially for ourselves. To take note, when you talk about culture, it is both the physical and the mental. Meaning, the way we function, it is influenced by how you construct yourselves to others. So this kind of culture, it is constructed by you. It is constructed by how you think about yourself. Okay? So that is the idea of human construct culture. So if I construct myself to become a psychologist someday, so somehow I will take some action. I will do the things that would make me a better person, that would make me a better psychology student, right? So that would make me a better functional person for myself and for the other people. So it really depends on how we make our own construction about our own selves. So for example, when you look at over a body of water, 'di ba? Kumutan-aw ka na nila. So kung kuan pa na siya, very fresh pa lang, so an untouchable nga island. So when you go there, the first thing that comes into your mind is this: I will develop it, right? So when you think about that one, so from that untouchable island, so when you go there, you have your own human construct culture that tells you you have to develop something for this island to become beautiful or to be known. So that is the influence of our human construct culture. So it really depends upon our culture. So in short, how we think about and what we do with our environment, it really depends upon our culture. It really depends on how we construct our own culture. So the second is culture is shared, right? So what is culture is shared? So culture kuno is not only constructed. So culture is not only constructed. So they added something that culture, it is socially constructed by human beings in interaction with one another. Meaning, when you talk about culture is shared, culture is not all about how you think, how you construct your own self. It also depends on how you will construct your own thinking in interaction with one another. So, for example, so if you are thinking to develop this land, so possibly you will ask somebody to help you out. You will ask some advices from the people around you to make it possible for you to do it. So that's why your belief, your tradition is shared by anyone. So that is the idea of culture. It is not all about you thinking it alone. It is socially constructed. The people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, they're also part of your culture. So take note, your cultural ideas and understanding are shared by a group of people. That's why when you shared by a group of people, so your ideas, your thoughts, your ways of thinking are shared by a group of people. So when you try to blend in with one another, so your thoughts, your ideas might also change. So possibly the culture that is not in you may possibly be transferred to you because of the influences. So these are shared with a group of people, like your knowledge, your attitudes, and your values. That's why let's all be careful choosing our friends now, because possibly there, if you are blending with a group of people who are not that, good, no, they are doing something that is against your values. So possibly that culture which is not good, which is you are not used to, possibly to be transferred to you. It really depends on the culture of the person. It really depends on how you interact with this. But take note, your culture is shared, meaning it is socially constructed. So a lot of people will share ideas, knowledge, attitudes, and values. That's why when you talk to them, so bisan di pa kay kaingana ka broaden imong idea with regards to this. So possibly na ay changes sa the way you think about things. That's why as a teacher, no, we need to be careful dealing with our students, because possibly the culture that I have is, possibly it will be transferred to my students, my knowledge, my attitudes, and the values that is within me. Okay, so take note, it can change over time. The way you think about yourself, the way you think about your values, your knowledge. You might say that you are not good enough, but you are good enough. um people are people are really very influential when you talk about socially constructed thoughts about yourself. If they think that you are good enough, possibly you will feel down. But if they think that you are good enough, you will boost your self-esteem. So but because culture is shared, and it can change over time, and that culture is transmitted from one generation to generation. If my family has this kind of culture, so possibly when I get married, if I have kids, I will transfer that culture to my kids. So it can be transmitted by a group of people. So if you are not good with that idea, so possibly as time passes by, when you keep on sharing that idea, possibly later on you will be good at sharing that kind of idea. That is, culture is shared. Number three is culture is both objective and subjective. Do you agree with that? Culture, Dao, your belief, your traditions, your practices, it is both objective and subjective. What is objective components of culture? When you talk about objective components of culture, meaning the way we dress, the way we talk, the way we do our things, it is objective, meaning it is influenced by the things that surrounds you, meaning you are influenced by the things that you see. It is tangible, it is visible aspect of people's lives. So if they are wearing something like this crop top, possibly you're also wearing crop top, because what you see in them possibly transferred to what transferred to you. So these are the tangible, visible aspect of people's lives. If they are doing something like this, possibly you also do the same thing, right? So that's how our objective components of culture affects or influences the way we think about ourselves. So it's very important to get to know ourselves. It's very important to know when to follow things, when to do that kind of thing, the more you because culture is objective, meaning we follow based on what we see, based on what we observe, and based on the things that we see around us. That is objective components of culture. So if everybody is wearing something like this, I will wear that. For example, the more on the fashion, right, for this year 2022. So when when you hear that the new fashion for today's generation, you will try also to absorb it and follow it, because it is objective, meaning what you see, what you hear possibly influences your culture. Subjective, when you talk about subjective components of culture, meaning these are the invincible. You cannot see it, you cannot touch it, intangible aspect of that, that even if you don't see it, or even if you don't attach it, but there is something in you that you really wanted to do it, meaning it is subjective. It really depends on you. Nobody influences you to do it, but still you are doing it, because that is the subjective components of culture. Even if everyone is saying that you are not doing good things, but deep inside you, you are doing the culture that your parents has given you. So meaning it is the invincible, the intangible aspect of culture. Sometimes your friends will tell you why you are doing that, but they really think that you are doing something weird, but you feel that it's just part of your culture. So that is the subjective components of culture. So the fourth one is culture is nurtured. So what is nurtured? Meaning it's growing. So when you talk about it, a culture is nurtured is it involves nurturing and growth. So meaning for us humans, we need to teach our children our own culture, because the more we teach them the culture that we have, the good belief, the good traditions, the good practices that we have, so possibly they can also apply that to themselves. And once they apply it to themselves, they can also transfer it to their friends, to their family, to their soon to be family, right? So we need to inculturate the good culture that we have to our children, because culture is nurtured. We need to teach them, we need to train them, we need to teach them the good ways, the good practices that we have as a family. So culture is also related to growth through the fine arts, meaning when you love dancing, when you love visual art, so possibly when you were still young, you were taught by your parents how to dance. So because culture is nurtured, you are not good at dancing, but as time passes by, because your parents are both a good dancers, so possibly you can also adopt that kind of dancing. So culture really is nurtured. It is through social behavior. It is through social interaction. Okay, by merely observing your parents, what they are doing, possibly you can absorb it, right? So, but if if you are taught by your parents to do that kind of culture, even if you are getting older, you are still practicing it, because culture is nurtured, and it is through social behavior, it is through observation that you can observe a lot of our culture, with our parents, with our families, with our colleagues. Okay? Okay, let's talk about sociology. So when you talk about anthropology, their focus is the whole society. Okay, the focus is the human society, the culture, the whole picture. So sociology, their main focus is more on the interaction between or within the society. So meaning their focus is not the whole society. Their concern about the the interaction between society from a slightly different angle. So they also study culture, but a slightly different angle. Okay, so they are more interested on the interaction between society, from one society to another society. Okay, so the first term, so there are five terms commonly used to describe social groups that share important cultural elements. So since their focus is more on the smaller portion of the whole society, number one is we have the subculture. The subculture, it means that they have a very unified set of ideas. So na sila sa ubos, a very unified set of ideas or practices. That is the subculture. The second is the microculture. The microculture is they have their own traits, values, and behaviors. Okay, so but the good thing of microculture is they have a strong linkage. And subculture is they don't have a strong linkage. They stick to what they believe in. They have a unified, a strong set of foundations and ideas, and they don't share it. You just focus it kung asa na siya nabilong, diha lang na siya. That is a subculture. But the microculture is they also have their own set of belief, practices, and values, but they share it to others. Right? They share it to their neighbors, they share it to others. So perfect example of microculture is your family, classroom, and the workplace. So if you learn something from within your family, you share it to your friends, to your neighbor. If you learn something from the classroom, you share it to others. So this is part of our microculture. And we also have the minority group. So when you talk about minority group, from the word minor, so murag ubos ni sila, they feel discriminated, and they experience discrimination and subordination within a society. So they felt as separated from the physical or cultural rates because their culture is not accepted by the dominant group. That's why they are called the minority group. They share a sense of collective identity and common burden. So they share one collective identity. The next is the ethnic group. So this group, they share a common heritage. So there is a sense of peoplehood, or the feeling that one's destiny is somehow linked with others. So they share the same knowledge, and the way they identify themselves, it really reflects on how they behave and how they do their own culture. The last is the people of culture. So this refers to groups. They are, for example, the African to American, the Puerto Ricans. So these groups are they are in many schools and communities, the majority rather than the minority. So they don't feel discriminated because they are present in many schools, in many communities. So they are there. So they are widely accepted, the people of culture. So aside from the sociology, aside from the anthropology, we also have the cross-cultural psychology. So talk about the cross-cultural psychology is they are mostly interested with the effect of culture in the individuals. So they are mostly interested on the effects of culture to people. So they don't care about the interaction, the whole human society. Their concern is more about what are the effects of this culture to the people. Okay, so how culture affects an individual. So from that point of view, they also try to answer or to find ways on how to help individuals deal with this kind of with this kind of intercultural interaction. Meaning intercultural is you are not used to that, but you need to change it or to absorb it. Right? So that is intercultural interaction. So we have these two things, the culture specific versus the culture general framework. So what is culture general framework? So it is very important to know. So if you are a psychologist, no, it is really important to know the culture specific versus the culture general framework. So what is culture general concept? So when you talk about culture general concept, it applies to all cultural groups. It applies to everyone. Universal cultural groups. Okay, so for example, the way an individual learns how to learn depends on the people around him. So the way an individual learns how to learn depends on the socialization process used by his or her culture. So for example, I learned this kind of thing because of my culture. I learned this behavior, these practices because of my culture. So because of how I interact with another people. So I learned to talk with others because I was once a working student. I was once a cashier, so I really have to talk, and I really have to express myself to my customer, or to entertain customers, because that is how my society works. If I will not adapt it, I will not be able to survive that kind of job. So that is culture general concept. It applies to everyone. Okay, so it doesn't tell us anything about an individual's preferred learning style, but sometimes because of our socialization process, because of how we interact with others, possibly we are we are trying to accept it, we are trying to practice it because of the socialization process. That's why let's all be careful no dealing with other people, because the way you socialize with them, it possibly changes the way you think about yourself, your culture, especially your culture, your belief, your traditions. Okay, so how about the culture specific concept? The culture specific concept, on the other hand, it applies to a specific cultural group. This means when you compare it to culture general concept, it applies to everyone. I will do this because everybody is doing it, right? But for the culture specific concept is I will okay. So how about the culture specific concept? Okay, so I have discussed the idea of culture general concept. It applies to everyone. But for the culture specific concept, it applies to a specific cultural group. This means I have a strong direct participation for me to learn. So I have to be with them. I have to practice what they are practicing for me to learn something about them. So I don't have to do it because it really depends on what culture that they are in, or what culture that they are practicing. So that's why as a teacher, no, I need to know the cultural general concept for my students, if this kind of thing will apply to everyone, or the culture specific concept, or if this kind of activity or thing it only applies to a specific cultural group of my students. So we need to have a strong knowledge about this one if we want to understand the cross-cultural psychology of our students. So they need to practice, or to do observation, inquiry, and study. That's why it's not easy to do cross-cultural psychology, because you are trying to do intercultural. You try to merge or specific group of people. So those are the area of cross-cultural psychology. So there are specific themes from cross-cultural psychology. Number one, people tend to communicate their cultural identity to others in the broadcast possible terms. What does it mean? That when you talk about cross-cultural psychology, when you try to to be with them, people are very expressive. People wants to express their own cultural identity. So people loves to share their own cultural identity. So you have to understand that kind of way. The second is because we are multicultural, so our cultural identity is dynamic. It is changing, it is flexible, it is always changing. Nothing is permanent because we are living in a multicultural identity. We have differences in our cultural identity. It is dynamic and changing. Number three, so while culture is complex and variable, it is nevertheless pattern. Meaning, culture is culture is very complex. It is not stagnant. It is changing. It is dynamic. So that is the idea of the cross-cultural psychology. The fourth one, interaction with other culture can be viewed as a resource of understanding. So if you are a psychologist, you need to do interaction for me to understand other people. We need to do social interaction, social observation, social study to know the differences in our cultural identity. The fifth one is behavior should be judged in relation to its context. So the way people behave, so we should not judge it based on our subjectivity. We should always remember to to consider a lot of things before judging one another because of their own behavior. Number six is persons holding a multicultural perspective continually strive to find common ground between individuals. So since we are holding a multicultural perspective, meaning we have differences in how we think, how we behave, so we have our own cultural identity, but the good thing is we are trying to find our common ground between individuals. We are trying to look for a common ground that we as a people, we try to blend in, we try to be with others just to understand their own cultural identity. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again for my next video blog. Thank you and God bless you.